Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and today I have a little bonus for you. So we've been celebrating the 12 days of Christmas for the past 12 days, but I actually have a little bonus extra day for you, kind of like a baker's dozen, if you will. And I wanted to share with you a little trip that my husband and I took that I think that you will enjoy. And it's very much Christmas related, so I didn't want to wait any longer to share it with you. So here we go. But first, I want to show you, I forgot yet another bookish gift to share with you in my video the other day of all of the Christmas gifts I received that were bookish. I got this Little Women mug. Well, actually, I got a gift card to Barnes & Noble from my nephew and his wife. And I went there and there actually, believe it or not, there weren't any books that I really wanted to get. Plus I have to work through some books I have on my shelf before I purchase more. But I did see this Little Women mug and I was like, oh, I got to have that. So I got the Little Women mug. On the other side, it says, I'd rather take a coffee than compliments just now. So love that and enjoying this mug. So on New Year's Day, my husband and I went to Delaware. We took the train and we went to a house called Winterthur, which was established. Well, I don't know when the actual house was built. Actually, I really should look up more information, but I know it was owned by the DuPont family starting at some point in the 19th century. And the DuPont family owned the house, the Winterthur house, and they greatly expanded it and they added some additions. So it's a really huge, rambling sort of house. And there's a lot that you can do there. There's the house itself that can be toured. And then there is a museum that is part of the house, but it's like an actual museum with galleries, etc. And then there is a library, as well as extensive grounds that have been landscaped. So there are various areas of the garden that you can explore. We definitely want to go back in the spring or early summer. We're thinking about maybe during our spring break, taking a couple days to go there, because I can imagine that it would be really beautiful in the spring when the flowers are blooming. In particular, there is one area of the grounds where the owner, Henry DuPont, I think his name was, had planted massive amounts of bulbs of daffodils and crocus and all those early spring flowers. So like March and April is probably a really gorgeous time of year there. So maybe on spring break, we might go and take another peek at it. But we went there at Christmas time because they had a special Christmas display. Now, once again, I don't know if this is what they do every year or if this was just their theme this year, their Christmas decorating theme. What they did was they took books from the actual DuPont family library. Now, the first DuPont to come to the States, and again, I'm sorry, I should have looked this up. They came from either France or Germany, I'm not sure, but they came to the States, and the first DuPont gentleman had his library with him of 8,000 volumes. That is an insane amount of books for any era. It's a huge personal library, huge. So he brought that. So obviously books were of vast importance to this family and they enjoyed reading. Apparently they had a tradition of reading books, I think on New Year's Eve or giving books on New Year's Eve. And so what they did at Winterthur, at the house, they put a Christmas tree in each room of the tour of the house. And they decorated the tree based on books in the family library. So they're all old classic books, original editions, some really amazing copies of the books. They have the book there that you can see as well. And the trees were so imaginatively decorated to represent the themes in the books. So I took some video clips all the way through. We were walking through this house and seeing these trees. So I'm going to go ahead and show you all of those. As well, there is a little bit of clips from the museum, we went to 2 of the exhibits before we toured the house, and then we had some extra time, so we went back and toured a couple more exhibits. So in the video clip, you will see some scenes from one of the exhibits. There were a whole bunch of Staffordshire figurines, which were figurines from England, but a lot of them were based on literary characters, also historic characters, biblical characters, mythical characters, that kind of thing. And so they have a whole collection of the Staffordshire figurines. And then I was particularly interested, of course, in the literary ones. There was Shakespeare and some characters from Shakespeare, and there was even Uncle Tom's Cabin, characters from Uncle Tom's Cabin there. Uncle Tom's Cabin actually had a huge presence. That whole book had a huge presence there, both at the house and at the museum. And I'm assuming that there was a copy of that book in the DuPont library. I would imagine that would be the case. And they have many other books from that era. But there were also some artifacts in the house and in the library and in the museum connected to that book. So it showed up a lot in the course of the day that we were there. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and walk through the grounds and the house and the museum, and I'll show you some of the fun things that we saw. This is the outside of part of the building. You get a glimpse of the rambling house and the grounds. And this is a floating Christmas tree. It's in the reflecting pool, which was, I believe, the first of its kind in the United States in the early 20th century. And there's a little dragon keeping guard at the other end of the reflecting pool. And moving on from here, you can enter in through the house through these stairs. It's not how we got into the house the day that we visited, but it is one way to access the house from the grounds. Inside the museum, there was this lovely little tableau set up themed with the secret garden. You can see the book there. And they had all of these items made from book pages. The little lantern and these little animals. It was such a dreamy little setup and perfect for a fun little photo op. And this was on the other side of the door from that one, just a continuation of the same idea. Here we have the door that goes into the secret garden. And again, more creatures and items made from paper and from books. In particular, you'll see here in a second, there's a cute little dog in the doorway there. And some hedgehogs. So adorable. I just loved this little tableau that they had set up with the spring flowers peeking through the snow. This was a gingerbread setup. I believe it was made by a baker in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There is a train station on the property of Winterthur, and so the building was made to look like the train station that's there, which apparently still works for cargo trains. And then they made this gingerbread train to go with this station.
I'm assuming everything in this display is technically edible, but it's also a gorgeous work of art. This was the collection of Staffordshire figures that I mentioned. They had these religious ones, characters from the Bible like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, etc., as well as heroes of the faith. Then heroes and villains from stories and history. Classical figurines, Greek mythology, etc. The monarchy and other people from Britain. And then the literature section, which was naturally my favorite. There's Shakespeare there on the left, and Henry V, I think, on the right, played by a famous British actor. I don't recall who at the moment. Then this is the set of characters from Uncle Tom's Cabin that I mentioned, and figurines from children's poems, Mother Goose rhymes, etc. This is in the house itself. This is the entryway, the foyer as you come to the house. And this is the opening setup that just kind of sets the tone for what you will find. Has some basic information about the family. I loved the little ornament at the top of this tree. I asked about the ornaments on this little tree, but they couldn't tell me anything specifically about them. They said there are a lot of ornaments in the collection. Now, here we have the trees. This is the Weird Sisters from Macbeth by Shakespeare. And this is the tree inspired by that book and those characters in particular. So imaginative, as well as beautiful. And I love the use of natural elements here. And the little witch's hat to top the tree. And this is, oh goodness, a French title, Le Fleur Animée, which was a popular book in the Victorian era of flowers that had been turned into people. And then this was the room that was decorated in Japanese style. And so the tree was in keeping with that. I don't remember what book, if any, went with this. I think this was one room that did not have a story in particular associated with it. And this is the tree that goes with the Black Tulip by Alexander Dumas. You can see the tulip ornaments in there and the tulips wound around the tree. A very gorgeous tree. I loved the garland of tulips there. This was based on a poem that I forget at the moment, but it was also inspired by the bank of daffodils that I told you about and other spring flowers that Henry DuPont planted on one side of the gardens on his estate grounds. There's a poem that goes with it, but I forget what. Going up these stairs are poinsettias and then a tree at the top. If you can guess, Alice in Wonderland. This room is decorated to represent the importance of being earnest, These are people who are putting on the play for their fellow guests. And you have the table set up for tea, and different Victorian decorations and other Victorian plays are stacked at the bottom of the tree. This one is themed with Moby Dick. This is a beautiful set of trees. One is representing the sunset and one is representing the sunrise. And they go with some beautiful poems by Phyllis Wheatley, who was a Black poet in the colonial times in America. I loved these trees, and they had a little card with the poems to go with it. This is in a little corner closet, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe tree. And you've got the lampstand there. And then as we scroll down to the bottom, at the foot of the tree, we'll see some Turkish Delight. And then this room, the dining room, was set up to look like Fezziwig's party from A Christmas Carol. And so they have it set up for guests. There were several copies of A Christmas Carol scattered throughout the room. There's one right there at the end of the table you can see. There's another copy of A Christmas Carol. These wreaths had ornaments with scenes from Aesop's fable on them. They were lining one of the hallways that we walked through. The poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," featuring a Santa Claus. And the fireplace set up with the stockings. And a tree decorated in a very Victorian style with some handmade ornaments, including some various Santa Clauses. And then there is an original copy of that poem. I didn't realize the book was so small. It's hard to tell in the video, but it was very small. And then this is a tree based on The Gift of the Magi, the short story by O. Henry, with the timepieces. And the top is a comb. I don't know if you noticed that. And then this is a tree based on the poem The Purple Cow by Gillette Burgess. The copy of the book that goes with it. Humpty Dumpty and other children's rhymes and children's books. You see Dr. Seuss there, including The Grinch and some other items on that little tiny tree. This was the Great Gatsby tree. So the topper on one direction looks like a champagne bottle, and from another direction looks like a peacock. So kind of a fun element there. Very gaudy, like the Great Gatsby. This is the side where the topper looks more like a peacock. I love that copy of the book.
I hope you enjoyed that tour of the museum and house at Winterthur. I wanted to tell you before I left about another exhibit that was so fascinating to me. We went to it after we toured the house, and I forgot to take any video clips of it. But it was based on a book that was written, I think, during the Reconstruction era after the Civil War by a Black gentleman whose parents had been enslaved. And it was about the past and the present and the future of the African American at that time. And it was fascinating from a historical, social history perspective, from a person perspective, just my interest in it. I was very fascinated, and the exhibit was very well done. So this book, I forget the name of it. I'm sorry. Again, I should have looked up all of this stuff before I sat down to film, but I need to film this real quick so we can start taking down our decorations. So I apologize that I did not adequately do the research before I sat down to do this, but I will put the information on the screen and in the description box wherever it's missing. So I forget the name of the author and the book, but it was kind of written in kind of a fantasy genre almost. So the author imagined that he was walking through a museum of the African American, and interestingly, he called it Africa American. And he started with portraits from the past, the history of particularly Black people in the United States of America, but also he touched some on the history in Africa as well, and current issues in Africa as well, especially like Liberia, etc. So he was like looking at these pictures and had this commentary on the plight and the successes, the tragedies and triumphs of the African American people in the American culture. So it was particularly from the perspective of being in America, struggling as slaves, but also their contributions to America as a country. And at some point, the story takes a twist, and he leaves the museum and enters this Black forest. And in the Black Forest, it's almost like you're on the Underground Railroad, and you encounter some of the dangers of the Underground Railroad, but also some of the successes of it. But then it kind of goes through, it introduces a character called, I think he called him Young Tom, who is supposed to be the antithesis of Uncle Tom, the future of the African American, as he called them, and what that might be like. He presents through a variety of ways the various differing viewpoints in society on the future of the American Black person. And it was really very interesting. And I kind of want to get my hands on a copy of the book. I want to look up and see if it's on Project Gutenberg or otherwise available somewhere. It looked like it would be a really interesting book to read. So I really enjoyed that exhibit, and it was very, very well done. And they had pulled some items from the DuPont family collection to exhibit as part of this display about this book. So they were using actual paintings and artifacts and other things to illustrate the various items that the author talked about in the story and the various scenes that he went through. And it was so interesting. I walked through that exhibit very closely, and I was just examining everything because it was so interesting to me. And the whole concept of the book was just so intriguing to me, and the way that they portrayed it, the way they brought that book to life, it was just very well done. Unfortunately, I think by the time this video goes live, that exhibit will no longer be open. I think January 4th was the last day that the exhibit was open. So I was one of the last people to be able to see it. And I'm so glad that I did. I didn't know anything about it before I went to the museum, but it was so fascinating. I really think it should be a permanent exhibit because of what it has to say, and because of just the whole nature of it. It was just very well done, and I really enjoyed it, and I just wanted to mention that. So that was our day in Delaware and our visit to the Winterthur Library and Museum and House. I hope that you enjoyed coming along with me, and I hope to go there again in the spring. So maybe we'll see some other new fun. Maybe I'll actually get to go to the library then, because we didn't this time. Maybe I'll have time to go to the library next time I go, and I can show you some of that. So anyway, that was my trip to Winterthur. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.